From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
Coming up on AgDay, we get our first look of the season at crop production estimates.
Across the board, they were quite disappointing and quite bearish.
As old stocks continue to grow here at home and abroad.
It's going to be our largest corn carryout since 87, 88, if realized.
And the trade war battle with China rolls on, but the president sets the ag world on fire with a possible new plan for farmers.
AgDay, presented by the all-new Chevy Silverado, the strongest, most advanced Silverado ever.
Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. We have lots to get to this morning. Our first crop production report of this season, a new look at ending stocks, but we want to begin with the very latest in the trade talks with China. Here's the latest. The U.S. and China wrapping up 2 days of face-to-face talks on Friday. Beijing officials saying the talks are at an impasse, not a breakdown. Washington correspondent Jim Wiesmeyer saying U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer will not renegotiate what has already been agreed to, but the two sides did talk about the other 10% that remains outstanding. The U.S. is now collecting additional tariffs on $200 billion worth of Chinese goods, those tariffs increasing early Friday morning from 10 to 25%. A Chinese foreign ministry spokesman says Beijing is hoping the Trump administration will meet China halfway in their dispute over trade. China's government says it will take necessary countermeasures in response to the latest tariff hike. Continuing our team coverage with Farm Journal's Tyne Morgan. Tyne, President Trump sent out several tweets about China Friday that could have big impacts in the ag world.
Yeah, Clinton, if a USDA report day isn't enough for the market to digest, traders woke up to a Twitter storm from the president. In a series of tweets, the president suggesting the trade war with China is far from over and there's no rush to get a deal. But he also suggested the administration will help offset some of those losses by buying $15 billion in commodities. So check out the tweet that the president put out on Friday. He said, quote, with the over $100 billion in tariffs that we take in, we will buy agricultural products from our great farmers in larger amounts than China ever did and ship it to poor and starving countries in the form of humanitarian assistance. But Clinton, going back to a grain reserve program where the government buys commodities is something Farm Journal Washington correspondent Jim Wiesmeyer says can create unintended consequences. And it's a move INTL FC Stone's Arlen Suderman says could create market confusion for farmers.
So if you put them in a reserve, which is the other option, that can strengthen the basis market because the cash market needs to have prices high enough to pull things into for processors and exporters for existing demand. But the futures market always knows that those supplies are there, and so it tends to put a cap on the market. So you have basis rising just enough to free up supplies to keep the pipeline flowing, but rallies are limited by the extent of the bushels that are in the bin.
Now, Clinton Suderman says the president suggesting the money made from tariffs could be used to actually purchase commodities may need congressional approval and could create an interesting battle in the months ahead.
Well, that's interesting, Tyne. Has the USDA commented on the president's tweets at all?
Actually, Ag Secretary Sonny Perdue said on Friday the president asked him to create a plan to support American farmers if this trade dispute with China continues. So will that relief come in the form of USDA actually purchasing commodities, or will it be in the form of more market facilitation program payments? Really, that's still up in the air and no further details are being discussed at this time.
A story to follow. Thanks, Tyne. Tying that idea about helping farmers hit by tariffs with another round of aid payments may be gaining some traction. Vice President Mike Pence saying, quote, we have already had preliminary discussions in the White House for additional support for farmers if this impasse with China continues, end quote. You'll remember USDA Secretary Sonny Perdue has repeatedly said no such additional aid was coming. And this could hurt the chances of China importing a lot of U.S. soybeans. China's agriculture ministry saying China will produce more than 17 million tons of soybeans this year. That's up almost 8% from last year, and USDA says it would be the most since 2004. And China pegs imports at a similar level to the year before at almost 85 million tons. Also, a big report day on Friday, and the trade war with China continuing to impact stocks. In the latest WASDE report, here are the numbers. The U.S. currently sitting on 485 billion bushels of corn, much higher than trade estimates. We're still sitting on a massive stockpile of soybeans as well. USDA puts it at 970 million bushels, about 6 million bushels higher than the trade expected, and wheat at 1.141 billion bushels, again higher than trade estimates.
We saw USDA lower corn used for ethanol 50 million bushels. That's been a continuous slide as we moved forward. We have seen some increases in ethanol production in the last couple weeks thanks to the EIA, but we've also seen a really strong increase in ethanol exports. That's probably what's buoying us as we move forward.
And looking at world ending stocks, corn is at 314 million tons. That's about 10 million higher than trade estimates. And soybeans, they're in at 113 million, again higher than our estimates. And wheat, 293 million tons. That's 16 million tons above the trade expectations. Also, we now have our first crop production numbers of the season. Many were wondering if the USDA would lower yields due to the slow planting pace and wet weather. And officials did take it down a bit when it comes to corn, moving numbers to trend line. It puts production at 15 billion bushels at an average yield of 176 bushels per acre. That's down a half bushel from the previous estimate. And putting new crop ending stocks, they're at 2.48 billion bushels.
We actually used trend yield of 176.0. Despite the fact we have some severe planting numbers, and historically USDA does lower trend yield on this report based on planting progress. So as far as both old crop as well as new crop numbers for corn, a bit disappointing.
I think if it weren't for the trade talks, that weather definitely is supporting corn prices. I think it's taken a little bit of a back seat and maybe putting the trade to sleep a little bit, because I think it definitely is impacting, and I think we're 7 to 10 days away from a real problem if the extended forecast pans out like it looks today.
Taking a look at soybeans, USDA also lowering the estimate here. Currently production at 4.15 billion bushels, yields at 49.5, again down a half bushel per acre. Ending stocks 970 million bushels. And on to wheat, where production for all wheat is expected to be 1.89 billion bushels. It equals 48.6 bushels per acre. That's up a bushel from last year. Ending stocks coming in at 1.14 billion bushels. The House has passed a $19 billion disaster aid bill. The plan would deliver long-sought relief to farmers, victims of hurricanes and floods, and rebuild southern military bases. Now, Democrats controlling the chamber are trying to dislodge the legislation from a Senate battle over aid to hurricane-slammed Puerto Rico. The measure passed on Friday over the opposition of many Republicans. They feel it should include the Trump administration's $4.5 billion request for humanitarian aid and border enforcement. All this news to digest as Plant 19 continues to roll on. Meteorologist Mike Hoffman has more in today's Crop Comments. Mike.
Thanks, Clinton. Well, hopefully at least some of you in the Corn Belt got a chance to plant this weekend. John in Alberta, Canada has had some nice weather planting recently. Check out this amazing drone footage he shared with us. John says he was seeding some wheat along the Badlands of the Red Deer River last week. Just a picture-perfect day to get that crop in. Now, checking out the drought monitor, obviously there's not much of an issue there. In fact, we're almost completely done with any severe drought. Last week we told you how there was no extreme or exceptional drought yet, which was the first time in drought monitor history around the year 2000 or so. Now we're almost done with severe. It's just a couple of counties there, far northwestern portions of New Mexico. We'll have your forecast for this week coming up in just a little while.
Introducing Farm Journal TV, on demand 24/7. AgDay, Machinery Pete TV. U.S. Farm Report on your phone and tablet. Download the Farm Journal TV mobile app today.
The Army Corps of Engineers New Orleans office is asking to do something unprecedented, open a historic flood control structure above New Orleans for the second time in a year. This comes as floods across the Midwest have caused billions of dollars of damage to homes, farms, and other businesses. Continued rains in the Midwest and Ohio Valley and floodwaters from the upper Mississippi River are heading down the Mississippi. In addition, officials say storms are expected to dump 5 to 10 inches of rain in parts of Louisiana and Arkansas. That's why the New Orleans office is asking the Corps' Mississippi Valley Division for authority to reopen the Bonnie Carey Spillway to relieve stress on New Orleans levees.
This is the wettest year we've had in about 124 years in aggregate. So we're in a very wet period, and this started in the summer and it's gone all through winter. So the water is high.
The spillway gets open to relieve stress on New Orleans levees when the Mississippi flows at 1.25 million cubic feet per second. To put that in perspective, that's fast enough to fill the Empire State Building in 30 seconds. All right, when we come back, we'll take a look at market reaction to Friday's reports and more trade news on talks between the U.S. and the EU. We showed you the train, now see the golden moment, celebrating 150 years since the golden spike.
Closed captioning is brought to you by BASF. Grow smart with BASF. We create chemistry.
In markets, plenty of new information for traders to digest on Friday, and grains are continuing to struggle. Let's get a feel for the action from the floor of the CME in Chicago.
Today in the grain market, the soybeans were lower after that big USDA report, a huge bearish report on all the grains across the board, and yet another new low. The high water also is stalling the barge movement, and we're just have supplies everywhere. The futures dropped, but it seems like that big whopper of a number was already in the market because we didn't see it fall as sharply as we would have expected. Corn was also lower. Those ending stocks were plentiful. The world stocks are greater than even the prior report that came. All the fundamentals are really against corn and soybeans and even wheat. I think that the fundamentals are still wildly bearish. Wheat was also lower. Those big stock numbers, both global and domestic, beyond anything that we've ever seen, and the market is down. We even see Kansas City wheat in the 380 area.
Ted Seifert with Zaner Ag Hedge, our guest here today. You know, Ted, we had this big report from USDA on Friday. I think the question that everyone is asking is, does the market even care?
Yeah, that's a great question, Clint. Usually this is one of the bigger reports of the year because it's the first time that we see the USDA's new balance sheet, new crop balance sheet on a WASDE report.
Right.
But this time, not really. I think the market's kind of just brushing past it because a lot of these numbers are going to change. Every year this time, we're always questioning production numbers because we don't know. We don't know what the weather's going to be like, and so on and so forth. Usually, though, we're looking at the demand side and saying, okay, there might be some tweaks there. But this year is a big guess. You know, what's going to happen with the trade in particular? You know, are we going to continue to do business also with the big South American crop for corn?
Right.
What's our market share going to look like for that? What's ethanol going to be? So many question marks this year. So I think we're just kind of taking it with a grain of salt, looking at the numbers, saying, okay, it's a start, but with so many uncertainties, it's not, you know, concrete, it's not set in stone. We're just going to move on and kind of see what happens from here.
Yeah, appreciate it, Ted. We'll be back with more Ag Day here in just a minute.
For professional marketing advice specifically tailored to your needs, call Zaner Ag Hedge at 312-277-0113. Your next piece of equipment is on MachineryPete.com. Search equipment from dealerships across the country to find what you're looking for. Only on MachineryPete.com.
Welcome back to Ag Day. Your meteorologist Mike Hoffman looking at rainfall over the past week. And Mike, really, that southern portions of the country just getting hammered.
It's just awful. I mean, the amounts are just amazing from Kansas all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. Now, these are estimated rain amounts from radars all across the country from a week ago Saturday to this past Friday. So it's a week period, 7 days worth of rain, and you can see some decent amounts. It's been wet in most areas east of the Continental Divide, basically. A few spots didn't see too much rain, like parts of Kentucky into southeastern Indiana. But when you zoom in on this, you can see a huge area from basically Corpus Christi all the way along the Gulf Coast areas to New Orleans. All the pink areas, 8 inches plus in a 7-day period. And there's many areas with 5 inches plus, all the way up to Jackson, Mississippi, back across most of northern Louisiana, southern Arkansas. You go a little bit farther northwest, and there's another batch of extremely heavy rain, mainly south-central portions of Kansas, into the southeast and northeastern sections as well, and some areas of Oklahoma. You can see some areas got a lot, some areas didn't get so much. So it's a week that is just putting many areas even farther and farther behind. in this growing season. So the overall weather pattern, I see it kind of evolving here. I'm not sure what it's going to go to. In other words, a lot of times we see a pattern break down and then it goes right back to that pattern, or it goes to another pattern. But in this week, it's kind of evolving. And so we do have this system moving through the northeast as we head through the middle of the week. It comes out of the Great Lakes, warmer weather with the ridge in the western states. Another trough digs into the northern Great Lakes in New England as we head through the end of the week, a trough into the northwest. And then we kind of go with a cutoff into the middle of the Rockies there with a ridge through the Great Lakes. This is kind of a strange looking weather pattern there to me. So we'll have to see how that works out. A lot of times these models will kind of change things as time goes on. All right, temperatures this week below normal for the Great Lakes, Mid-Atlantic, Northeast, South Texas, over toward California. Above normal northern Rockies and a small part of the northern plains. Below normal precipitation from Iowa down into the southeast. Above normal for South Florida, much of Texas, the northwest, northern Rockies, and the northeast. 30-day outlook for temperatures below normal most of the plains, eastern Rockies, above normal southeast and the far west, and precipitation over the next 30 days above normal basically for the southern 2/3 of the country. That's a look across the country. Now let's take a look at some local forecasts. Heading to Fresno, California, first of all, partly sunny and very warm. High temperature up to 89. Minneapolis, Minnesota, maybe a morning shower, then a mix of clouds and sunshine, high 67. Columbia, South Carolina, partly sunny and less humid today, high around 81.
Still ahead, celebrating the history of moving America on rails, plus Machinery Pete.
Hey, stay tuned, folks. Coming up, my top 2 tips when you're selling a piece of equipment.
Closed captioning is brought to you by BASF. Grow smart with BASF. We create chemistry.
Now is the time of year equipment can make or break the season. Machinery Pete takes a closer look at the sale of a workhorse.
Well, a little something different today, folks. We're going to talk best practices when you're selling a piece of equipment. Now, 5 years ago, when I partnered my Machinery Pete business with Farm Journal, we set out to make the new best website on the internet for farm equipment for sale. And we did a ton of actual in-person research with farmer groups, farmers of all ages. We brought them to Peoria, Illinois, and did blind testing. Now, we worked with farmers using desktop computers, laptops, mobile phones, and iPads. And you know what the #1 takeaway we found from farmers about when they're searching for equipment? The more pictures, the better. And when I say more pictures, I'm talking way more than you think I mean. Now here's a perfect example, a listing from our MachineryPete.com website of this really sharp 1979 Steiger Cougar 3 ST251 tractor. 6,152 hours on it, for sale today in DuPont, Indiana at Dean Ford Farm Equipment. Now you know how many pictures they've got listed on this tractor? 126. Now here's the thing, our research at MachineryPete.com shows the more pictures you have of your listing, the more time people spend on your listing. Now my #2 tip, you have to put a sale price on it, whatever you're selling. If you say call for price, guess what? People just zoom right on by and they assume you're asking too much.
All right, thanks, Greg. You know, some big machines showed up in Utah. The steam locomotives on display in celebration of the Transcontinental Railroad. We'll head out west next.
In the Country is powered by Kawasaki. Let the good times roll.
Trains, they change so much in our country, the way we travel, the way we move things, and now part of that history is being celebrated. Several thousand train lovers gathered last week in Utah to catch a glimpse of a pair of restored 1940s era steam engines and celebrate the 150th anniversary of the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad. Now, we told you last week about the amazing restoration efforts of one of the trains, the Big Boy number 4014. After the two trains met up, there was a ceremonial tapping of a spike. There was also a celebration at the spot where the final golden spike was hammered back in May of 1869.
When the United States connected East and West through a Transcontinental Railroad, it changed America forever. You know, before the railroad, it took 6 months to go from New York to San Francisco, and you risked your life. Afterwards, it took about 10 days, and it was relative comfort.
Descendants of Chinese laborers who worked on the railroad also part of the celebration. Workers putting in 12-hour days in brutal conditions to build that railroad by hand. That's all the time we have this morning. I'm sure glad you tuned in. It's been part of your day with us. From all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day.